But like mentioned, I don't have anything here in the slides regarding the history of Findynet Cooperative, but I'd say that there are at least two paths which led us to founding of the Findynet Cooperative. One is that when we initially started to investigate this SSI domain, there was a sort of an ecosystem research program or project called TrustNet, of which many of the founders of Findynet Cooperative were taking part in as well. You can find a bit more about TrustNet online if you wish to do so. But then alongside, we did a couple of proof of concepts where SSI technologies were used. And those were ecosystem projects where we had the two largest banks of Finland, OP and Nordea, joining, as well as then Asiakastieto, the Finnish company registrar, PRH, Patentti- ja Rekisterihallitus, and also the tax administration. And those two ecosystem projects or proof of concepts that we did were focusing on organizational digital identity. The first project, within the first project, we created a model how a limited liability company could be founded fully digitally. I mean, the whole end-to-end process, starting from signing the founding agreements, registering then the company to company register, registering the company to tax authorities, pre-tax register, and so on and so forth. So the whole process was fully digital. And then the second project, which followed after this one, the proof of concept, was around how to digitalize the share trading of unlisted companies. And due to these projects, we then realized that we need actually a national SSI network to be able to fully digitalize those kind of processes that we were envisioning. And in the beginning, I think our, let's say, idea was that we could maybe use the sovereign network. I don't know whether Nikki Hickman already talked about the sovereign network, but the vision of the sovereign network was that initially, back in 2017, the idea was that it would be sort of a global SSI network. But then, and there's the problematic of governance. So Sovereign was a US-based foundation, and then they started to also talk about introducing crypto tokens to the network. And whenever you start to talk about crypto tokens and so on, there's a major complexity regarding regulation within different jurisdictions, and how, for example, money laundering and KYC will be handled, and so on and so forth. And we felt that within the Findy community that this is not the way to go forward. And due to this, we concluded that we need the national network instead of a global one, which would introduce major problems from legal perspective, how to meet the different requirements from authorities' point of view and from financial services providers' point of view. And I think we came into this conclusion during some time in maybe 2018, 2019 or so. And once we then decided that we would need a national SSI network, we initiated the discussions with the Finnish Ministry of Finance, who is essentially responsible for implementation of, for example, eIDAS regulation on a national level. And the idea was that we would found a public-private organizations, since the plan was that this would the network that would be developed by Findy would be kind of a national utility. And whenever you are building a national utility, it requires participation from both public and private sectors. So for various reasons, I will go into that bit later. But this is kind of the introduction as to why Findynet was initially envisioned and why we've been pursuing this. Then some very basic stuff about what it is all about, and this is now a sort of an elementary level explanation of what this is all about, and you may have, and I believe Nikki has already introduced this, and Antti also touched on this introduction a bit earlier. But obviously this is about digitalizing different types of proofs, and here we can see proofs which relate to natural persons, but obviously we shouldn't forget about proofs related to organizations as well. I don't have a presentation. In this presentation, I'm not necessarily covering the organizational identity that much, but if you want, I can talk a bit more about what organizational identity is as well. But it's most often it's easier to understand SSI from a, let's say, from a human's perspective, and what it is for natural persons. And the sort of background obviously is that we have a lot of different types of proofs which relate to identity holders, whether those would be driver's licenses, library cards, e-receipts, or whatever, or tickets. And these are obviously paper-based nowadays. And we need to find, hopefully, a generic model how to digitalize these sort of proofs. The alternative is that we would be needing to have an application for each and every single proof that needs to be exchanged, and then we would end up with hundreds of different applications in our mobile phones, and we don't believe that is the scalable model, because people just wouldn't want to download hundreds of different applications for proofs that they just use every once in a while. And we wouldn't see a take up for digitalizing these sort of proofs. So we need a very generic model. The idea is obviously then that we would have a general purpose digital wallet within which we can store all of these sort of proofs. So I'm sure this is sort of a familiar topic to you. And the model is this, which Antti already exhibited earlier, that the user would be in the center, whether that would be a person, organization, or a thing. They would be in a full control of their own data. The users would be able to receive proofs from the sources, different sources of verified data, whether those would be public sector entities, public sector registrars, or whether those would be private sector entities. Like, for example, an employer could verify that a certain employee is employed by that particular organization, and that particular person can represent the company, for instance. And then we have obviously verifiers to whom these users share different types of verified attributes. And the idea obviously then is that with these sort of digital proofs or digital facts, we would be on a societal level, we would be able to improve the trust across different entities, organizations, and individuals. And it would significantly lower risks related to digital interactions and business processes. So that's the background. And here now the key slide related to Findy, what it's all about. So the cooperative was officially founded in 2021, and it's a non-profit public-private organization that develops a national general purpose shared and secure digital identity network. So this is something that I already introduced in the beginning, that the idea is that it would be public-private, since the ambition is that the Findy network would be sort of a national utility, more or less. And the reason why we feel that it should be non-profit is that we believe that these sort of public utilities or national utilities should not be profit-seeking. It's a common capability that everyone should be able to use without any high costs. So from that point of view, the network is just an enabler. It's not a solution by itself. It's an enabler for digital processes. Who is then the Findynet Cooperative for? The Findynet Cooperative, and I will explain this through the architecture illustration bit later, but if you already remember the trust over IP stack and how it's been described today, but there are 4 different layers there. One is the trust registry. The layer 1 is trust registry. Layer 2 is digital wallets. Layer 3 is verifiable credentials, and then on layer 4 we have ecosystem governance. So within this stack, Findynet Cooperative will be governing layers 1 and 2, meaning that the idea of Findynet Cooperative is to establish a national network of digital wallets. And the primary purpose of Findynet Cooperative is to ensure interoperability of these various digital wallets, which then can be provided by private and public sector organizations. So in that sense, the membership of the Findynet Cooperative is aimed to providers of digital wallets. It's not the Findynet Cooperative itself will not be servicing end users. The cooperative will not develop a digital wallet, since that is the role for the members of the cooperative. But and therefore also the idea is not that the individuals would join the cooperative. That's not the person. That's not the purpose. The idea is simply that those organizations who want to provision digital wallets to end users and which wish to be part of the wish that their wallet would be part of the Findy network, those are the organizations that we foresee that would join the cooperative as members. And as far as these wallet providers are concerned, the Findynet Cooperative is open for all digital wallet providers, and the current membership fee is actually quite low, at least from an organizational standpoint. The membership fee being 10K. We have currently 9 members on board, and it's actually quite heterogeneous group at the moment with different kinds of organizations. So we have Finance Finland, which is the Finnish financial sector cooperation organization, Finnish Post, Nixu, which is a cybersecurity company, Nordea Group, OP Financial Group, Social Insurance Institution of Finland, i.e. Kela, Technology Finland, which is the technology industry cooperation organization in Finland, then TietoEVRY and Vastuu Group. And so if we take a look at this group of organizations that are members of Findy, there are essentially two different groups. One being the wallet providers, and within that group I would include maybe Finnish Post, Nixu, Nordea, OP, Kela, TietoEVRY and Vastuu Group. And then we have the second group, which is then more a lobbying organization or support organizations, which then include Technology Finland and Finance Finland. And we don't obviously foresee that Finance Finland or Technology Finland would actually provide wallets for end users. But since this is quite a significant national initiative, we believe that it's important to have these sort of lobbying organizations and collaboration organizations as members of Findynet Cooperative as well. So that's about kind of the basic logic about concerning Findynet Cooperative, who it's for, and so on. And then about a bit about the government grant. What is the purpose of that? So we this is was quite a lengthy discussion with the Ministry of Finance. The negotiations took for about two years before we were finally able to get this grant. And the idea with the grant is that we would build this pilot environment or pilot network for self-sovereign identity trust network during these 2 years, during 2022 until up until end of 24. It might actually be that since due to the delays of, for example, implementation of the ADAS regulation, it might be that this will be extended to 25 as well, but that remains to be seen. But the idea is that we would create the basis for a Finnish self-sovereign identity network that would be compatible with ADAS regulation. So idea is here not that this would be, let's say, something completely separate from ADAS regulation, but we need to figure out how we can interoperate with ADAS compatible services. And obviously ADAS regulates the cross-border electronic identification and electronic trust services. And within ADAS, in the revision, they also talk about digital wallets and very similar type of, on a high level, very similar type of a model that is being pursued by SSI without explicitly mentioning or requiring sort of a SSI type of an implementation. So mainly the funding is provided to build this sort of to develop this sort of a wallet network and to ensure interoperability wallets, but that interoperability across the different wallets, but it is not only for that purpose. The grant funded, as it mentioned here, the grant funded package will also include 2 to 5 pilot projects to test the functionality of the network in practice. And obviously the logic here is that I mean, we could build the world's best wallet network and have the best possible governance model for the network and all that, but it's purely a capability. It doesn't have any sort of inherent value in itself. The value of this type of a network is realized when it's actually being used. And that's why these pilot projects are of essential importance. So during this year, couple of years, we will also be looking forward to supporting different types of 2 to 5 pilot projects where the network and the wallets, Findy connected wallets, are actually being used. And with this respect, we will actually work with the Ministry of Finance to identify and launch these pilot projects. And there are a couple of ones which are already quite far in the way, on the way relating to this. For example, one that, for example, Antti and I have been working on lately is e-receipt, which is part of the real-time economy program, which is ongoing in Finland. Meaning that you'd be able to get the receipts, purchase receipts from shops, from taxis, from hotels, whatever, to your personal digital identity wallet, and then you'll be able to use them whenever you need to. And there are a lot of different use cases where these type of digital receipts could be used. So, for example, if Antti and I are traveling for business purposes, we need to provide a copy of the receipt to our employer so that we can receive compensation for the business related travel expenses that were incurred. Another use case might be that, for example, if you are filing an insurance claim, for example, your phone broke or whatever, you could actually prove that you have purchased that phone, and you could prove that how much you paid for it. And there would be a significant value for insurance companies if they could verify that you have a digital proof of the purchase. There's quite a bit of insurance fraud in Finland on an annual basis, which amounts to about 100 million on annual level. So that's something about the use cases that we are talking about and the logic. And I will not go into SSI architecture that much here, just to mention that Findynet work will be based on the SSI architecture. Antti can then talk more in more detail about what this architecture is all about on a technology and governance level. But just to again repeat, what is the focus of Findynet Cooperative? What will it govern and what will it not govern? So I'm sure this is familiar to you, this architecture stack, but basically we have these end users who interact in various ways by using digital wallets, sharing verifiable credentials and proofs and so on. And then we have digital wallets, which are then obviously required for these interactions to take place. And then we have the shared decentralized infrastructure, although this is something which may change as we move along, but at least initially the idea was that we would have a shared decentralized trust registry here, which would then contain public PKIs, public signing keys, revocation registry, and so on and so forth. The development within this domain has proceeded to a bit different direction, so it might be likely that we will actually have a ledgerless network. But nevertheless, this is the current model and how we sort of illustrate these layers nowadays. And then we have the trust ecosystem layer, which then concerns individuals' trust ecosystems where different kinds of verifiable credentials and proofs are exchanged. And within each trust ecosystem, the organizations and entities participating will then need to agree liabilities and processes related to issuance and usage of different types of credentials. But as far as Findy is concerned, these top two layers are not something that we are focusing on. I already mentioned that the main purpose of Findynet Cooperative is to ensure that the different wallets that will be used by end users, these wallets would be interoperable. So that means that we need to ensure interoperability on two different, let's say, domains. One is obviously technical interoperability. How do these wallets actually communicate from a technology standpoint? And then the other one is legal interoperability. And when we talk about the legal interoperability, there are different types of things that we need to be taken into account. For example, related to basic service provisioning, what should be the minimum uptime of wallets, for instance? How should these wallets handle cyber security aspects? How can the wallet providers and can the wallet providers use the customer data in some way, and so on? These are the kinds of things that we need to then cover in the network rulebook. What is the role and responsibility of different wallet providers beyond just technical interoperability? So from that perspective, Findynet Cooperative is, and the project that we do is a bit like a standardization exercise. Not that we would be developing standards by ourselves, but we will describe what are the standards and specifications that should be used, and then additionally creating that governance model for relating to different service providers. And for instance, how do we handle a situation if we have some type of malicious actor in the network provisioning wallet services? How do we then exclude, for example, a certain wallet provider from the network? Or how do we enforce the rules so that of the network, so that the wallet provider will act in a suitable manner? So that's basically what we plan to do with Findy Network. Any questions at this point, or is this perfectly clear?
Yeah, I could come in, but there's actually been very good questions on the chat, and I already had a chance to answer to them in the chat, so we don't need to go in there. I think I will address them in my speech as well.
Okay. Is there anything which hasn't been answered?
Not in chat, but if anybody wants to ask directly now, go ahead.
If not, I'll move forward. Okay, so the plan is that Findynet Cooperative will provide this sort of a digital trust layer on a national level, but not touch the sort of a human trust layer. Instead, this is something where each and every trust ecosystem by themselves can then define the rules and use this hopefully ubiquitous general purpose capability that is being provided by Findynet Cooperative, as well as different wallets. But we don't, from a Findynet perspective, we don't define the different use cases, how this tool can be used, and so on. It's the idea is that it will be more or less like a public utility. And for example, kind of maybe bit of an analogy might be, for example, Fingrid in Finland. End users, meaning us consumers, we don't sign agreements with Fingrid. Fingrid doesn't have to know what sort of lamps or computers or washing machines we buy and use in the whilst and connected to the electricity network. That's not the role for Fingrid. The purpose of the Fingrid is to be a public utility for electricity companies, and that's kind of a bit like the same logic here with Findy. Yeah, I probably won't go into this kind of what are the different use cases. I'm sure this is familiar to you. Basically, the idea is that any kinds of credentials could be stored within a digital identity wallet going forward, and obviously this will not happen by itself. This is something that each and every Findy member will pursue together with their customers, and hopefully we can then digitalize all of these types of credentials. But the main point, obviously, about Findy, and this is something that Antti already mentioned in the beginning. The main point about Findy, the kinds of digital wallets which will be provided by Findynet members, is that compared to the traditional model, is that where data is shared whenever a mandate is given. The model where end users need to provide a mandate so that the data can be shared. This is not really a scalable model in itself, because the mandate has to be given for each specific purpose, and you won't be able to provide or get a credential from any type of registry which you could then use wherever you like. You always need to inform the registry holder or provide mandate to the registry holder so that they can share your data for specific purposes. Whereas in the Findy model or SSI model, you'd be able to have the proof in your wallet. You would be able to freely share that proof with whomever you wish, without the registry holder having to know anything about that. And so, for example, typical use case might be that, let's say that you have a digital identity card in your wallet, and you need to prove that you're over 18. It's not really, doesn't really make sense that, for example, the population registry would always need to know how often times do you go to, for example, Alko and buy wine. That would be nonsensical. And so obviously this type SSI model is much more suitable for that, so that you can independently, whenever you need to, you can prove something about yourself without the registry holder having to know anything about that interaction. And then there are obviously a huge amount of different use cases and proofs that then have that can support various use cases. Maybe to conclude with this, then, why did we set up Findynet Cooperative as we did? This is maybe a kind of a recap of what I already mentioned, but it's to establish a national verified data network, a public utility of sorts. The idea is that the cooperative provides this shared network without vendor lock caused by centralized services. So the idea obviously is that this would be a distributed model without any sort of single point of failure. That is the ambition. Would be from that point of view, we we would be in a decentralized model, for example, when we talk about wallets, each end user could freely choose whichever wallet they want to use, and there would be no vendor lock from that perspective either. The analogy for that might be, for example, email. We have globally recognized protocols for email, and it's not that we would need to have to use a specific email service to interact with one another. Instead, we can freely choose which email service we want to use, and that is more or less the logic with the SSI model as well, and the Findy model. I already mentioned about the non-profit aspect of Findy. We don't seek any speculative market value, and if there's any surplus that we receive from our members, as for example service fees, that money will be allocated to development of network and operations of the Findynet Cooperative. But obviously the aim would be that we don't make any profit, and we just cover our costs. One logic behind why we did select the cooperative model is that it's very the cooperative model is very resistant towards hostile takeovers, meaning that there are no shares such that could be traded. There's I don't remember the English term for it, but the way that the cooperative works is that each member has basically one vote, and so you can't hoard votes by, for example, taking over multiple organizations who are part of the Findy network. If you buy, let's say, 5 organizations who are part of Findy network, you'd still end up with just one vote. That is something that we have built into the governance model, meaning that, for example, Google or Facebook or Apple couldn't buy and take over the Findy network. Then the other thing is that when we talk about cooperative, it's very well established model for joint governance, meaning that it's easy to join and leave a cooperative. You don't have to buy shares, you just buy a membership, the single vote in the organization, and you can also leave the organization whenever you wish to do so. And as far as the governance is concerned, like I mentioned, even from a Finnish law perspective, there's a well-established model in terms of how cooperatives would be jointly governed. So that's why we felt that this would be the best legal entity model for Findynet. And then the funding aspect as well. We need to have this is more about why did we establish the cooperative in the first place, and why did we establish this sort of a legal entity? Obviously, whenever there's joint development, that needs to be funded in some way. And so to allocate that funding, we needed a single entity through which the funding, which will be used for the development, could be channeled. And for example, the government grant, that receiving that type of government grant requires a legal entity that can be then jointly governed. So that was one idea behind the cooperative.